This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidhu. It's Monday, October 14th. This is Africa 54. After a decade of conflict, thousands remain missing in Nigeria. We take you to the shores of Lake Malawi for a special report from Africa 54's Vincent Makori. And in our sports roundup, a focus on Kenyan sporting heroes, Eliud Kipchoge's marathon victory, and a one-on-one with boxer Dennis Akaf. We begin our broadcast in West Africa, where the International Committee of the Red Cross says they are seeing the world's highest caseload of missing persons in Nigeria. Nearly 22,000 Nigerians have been reported as missing in connection with a decade-long insurgency by Islamist militant group Boko Haram. Chika Odua files this report from the group's stronghold in Borno State.
Abdul Hamid Bala and his wife have been refugees for about 5 years. They fled their community in northeast Nigeria when members of the armed extremist group known as Boko Haram attacked. Like so many others, they sought refuge here at Bakassi camp. With more than 43,000 people living here, this is the largest camp for displaced people in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State. Bala is looking for his father and younger brother. In the chaos of a Boko Haram attack, they were separated. It's been 5 years since he's seen them.
They went missing when Boko Haram invaded Gwaza. I was running with my brother who went missing. Then I climbed a mountain, and he entered the bushes looking for our father in the village. So after he went to my father, they went missing, and we don't know their whereabouts.
22,000 Nigerians have been reported missing in the ongoing war that Boko Haram has fought against the Nigerian government since 2009. Nearly 60% of registered people were minors at the time they went missing. The ICRC captures data and collects photos of missing persons. But the registry does not capture everything. That's because Boko Haram is still active in some areas.
The security situation determines where we can work and where we cannot work. So this is, the 22,000 is, as I said before, is like the tip of the iceberg, because what about the areas where we never had a chance of going to? What about in villages where something happened, there was an attack, and then everybody was wiped out?
Aid workers say that people with missing relatives often show signs of emotional distress, and for some, even depression. This resource center, set up by the International Organization for Migration, offers comfort to refugees with missing relatives. Here, they can play games, do artwork, and mingle with one another as a means of coping with the burden of not knowing where some of their loved ones are. The government is struggling to reunite families.
And when you don't have the capacity, either in terms of human resources or in terms of institutional strength, it becomes a challenge to carry out the responsibility. Every week, the station airs a live program called Indarai Drabo. It means, if there is life, there is hope. Every week, listeners call in and announce they're looking for a loved one. The program has helped with dozens of reunifications and posts the good news on its Facebook page. The ICRC helped Aishatu Bulama reunite with her 3 missing children. The aid group has solved at least 367 missing persons cases, helping to bring closure to relatives who don't know if a family member is dead or alive. Bala and his wife are still waiting for that closure. They say at this point, any news would make them feel better. Chika Odua for VOA News, Maiduguri, Nigeria.
Thousands of supporters of retired law professor Kais Saied celebrated into Monday morning after exit polls showed he won Tunisia's presidential election. Said's victory is being hailed as a revival of the 2011 revolution that brought democracy to the North African nation. Official results are expected later Monday. Said's opponent, media mogul Nabil Karoui, is leaving the door open to an appeal. Sunday's vote was only Tunisia's second free presidential election. It follows years of economic frustrations that overshadowed the legacy of the 2011 revolution, which threw out autocratic rule and inspired the Arab Spring. Said, who is backed by both Islamists and leftists, spent barely any money on his election campaign that has seized the imagination of voters with a promise to bring back the values of the 2011 uprising. Mozambicans head to the polls Tuesday to elect a president, provincial and legislative leaders. The ruling party, Frelimo's show of force appears to be threatening a peace agreement for the main opposition party, Renamo, signed between the two civil war rivals in August. Incumbent President Filipe Nyusi is all but certain he will be re-elected. The peace deal has given the opposition Renamo hope of winning more political power in a country dominated by Frelimo since the Southern African country's independence from Portugal in 1975. The elections come at a difficult time for Mozambique, a poor country with a population of 30 million. Cities such as Beira were hard hit by two devastating cyclones this year amid an Islamist insurgency in the north. Renamo fought Frelimo for 16 years from 1977 to 1992 in a Cold War conflict that killed about 1 million people. At least 3 mortar bombs were fired Sunday at Mogadishu's international airport. The attack reportedly injured 6 people in the compound where several embassies are located. The missions of the United Nations and the African Union, as well as the several embassies that are based inside the perimeter fence. Somalia has been plagued by conflict since clan warlords overthrew a dictator in 1991. The rebellion was followed by fighting between rival clans and an Islamist insurgency. Al-Qaeda-aligned Al-Shabaab, which seeks to topple the UN-backed government, often launches attacks in Mogadishu and across the country. There's been no immediate claim of responsibility for Sunday's attack. Meanwhile, it's the second anniversary of the single deadliest attack in Africa. Government officials and mourners gathered at the October 14th junction, the site where militants detonated a truck bomb, killing 587 people and injuring more than 300 others. Mogadishu's new mayor, Omar Mohamed, urged mourners to keep the memory of the victims alive. In February last year, a military court convicted Al-Shabaab's Hassan Aden Isaac for coordinating the truck bombing. Isaac was executed a year to the day the explosion took place. Now, the European Union is helping countries in Africa create biometric identity cards. The ID cards could make it easier for people on the continent to travel and access government services. But critics fear the EU-funded effort might infringe on Africans' privacy and harm democracy if authoritarian governments use the data to repress opposition. Maikos Katuro has more from Berlin.
One way the EU hopes to prevent future migration waves is by helping countries in Africa and the Middle East develop what are known as biometric ID cards. Biometric ID cards are a lot like biometric passports. They contain technology that stores fingerprints, facial, and iris scan data. But some worry that the biometric data can be abused.
These are problematic because they pose a severe threat to people's privacy rights and other rights on which that hinges. So, for example, freedom of expression, it poses a threat to their security, and it also poses a threat to democratization across the region.
Aidan Omanovich, who headed a study on biometric programs for Africa, says the EU can use the data to stop a future migration wave into Europe.
So the long-term goal here is to develop biometric programs, biometric capacity across the region, so that in the future EU migration authorities can access the information that's contained within them, can query those databases with African counterparts to essentially be able to deport people back to Africa.
A spokesman for the European Commission in Brussels dismissed the Privacy International allegations, telling VOA News in a statement, The data collected remain the property of the governments and is not to be shared with the EU or any project implementing partners, certainly not to prevent future migration waves. African migration projects are financed by the EU Trust Fund, which also oversees the biometric ID program. Analysts say it is too soon to tell if the program's biometric technology has been misused.
But then there's red lines. If you, for example, deliver technical equipment to countries that might be ruled authoritarian and that use this kind of technology, for example, to repress opposition parties, that should be a red line.
And that could hamper democracy, say internet freedom advocates.
The idea that the EU government will be able to access Africans' data is also extremely problematic, right? It's about the dignity of people.
NGOs want the EU Africa Trust Fund to be audited by the EU Parliament, which could stop the program if abuses occur. They also want assurances that development aid won't be diverted to finance the biometrics program. Michael Scaturo for VOA News, Berlin.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi says he will meet Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in Russia to discuss a dispute over a hydropower dam that the Horn of Africa's country is building on the River Nile. A long-running diplomatic standoff over building and operating the Grand Ethiopian Dam has heightened tensions between the two countries. Egypt worries the dam will threaten its already scarce water supplies. Sisi says he agreed to meet the Ethiopian Prime Minister in Moscow to discuss the matter. Russia will host the first Russian-African summit in the Black Sea resort of Sochi on October 23rd and 24th. Sisi and Abiy spoke on Friday after the Ethiopian Prime Minister won the Nobel Peace Prize for his peacemaking efforts with Eritrea. Sisi had earlier congratulated Abiy on Facebook. Last week, we brought you in-depth reporting from the Southern African nation of Zambia. This week, we turn our focus to Malawi. Here's Africa 54's managing editor, Vincent Makori, on the shores of Lake Malawi.
Lake Malawi is one of the largest freshwater lakes in Africa. For the millions of Malawians, this lake is a source of livelihood. It has one of the widest varieties of fish species. But for the last few years, due to population pressure and bad fishing methods, there has been a threat to the fish population in this lake. Now, for the next 1 week, I will be in Malawi, reporting on the fishing industry, environment, and education. This is Vincent Makori, managing editor, VOA Africa 54 in Mangochi, Lake Malawi.
Stay tuned for in-depth reports from Vincent throughout this week. On Friday, he will be part of a special co-production with our Malawian news affiliate, Zodiac TV. You won't want to miss that. Now, Sudan's ruling council and rebels have restarted peace talks to end multiple conflicts in the country, a key condition for Sudan's removal from the United States sponsors of terrorism list. The ruling council, which is a transitional government, has made peacemaking with rebels fighting Khartoum one of its main priorities. The council took over from the government in August when military and civilian protest groups signed a 3-year power-sharing deal following the removal of President Omar al-Bashir in April. Being designated a state sponsor of terrorism cut Sudan off from desperately needed relief and financing from lenders such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Removal from that list potentially opens the door for foreign investment. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, we go one-on-one with Kenyan boxer Dennis Akal. We'll be back.
am Shaka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
The lyrics could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. A beekeeping initiative in Tanzania is transforming women's lives, giving them financial independence while turning them into conservationists of the land they live on. The aim is to produce thousands of hives, which will be home to natural pollinators in protected landscapes. Most of the people who live here are Maasai. Many are now semi-nomadic, raising cattle in the traditions which have lasted for centuries. The initial funding for the beekeeping initiative was in the form of microgrants and training from a nonprofit organization called African Wildlife and People. Next up, an app aimed to help victims of domestic violence access support is now available in Albania. The app was developed by 3 16-year-old girls. Users answer a series of questions, and the app offers them testimonies from women who have escaped abuse and encouragement to report it. A new report by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe found almost 9 in 10 women consider gender-based violence to be common in Albania, and that 97% of victims never report it to the police. And finally, Sao Paulo Fashion Week took a politically charged tone, with local designers embracing activism on the catwalk. Controversial right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro has galvanized designers to take a stand on issues they are close to. Local designer Elush had his models brandishing placards that featured messages of positive impact on society. Cargo pants and designer face masks were prominent features in his show. And that's what's trending today.
Syrian forces have entered a town near the Turkish border a day after reaching an agreement with Syrian Kurds to move into the region in an attempt to counter a Turkish invasion. Syria's state-run Sana news agency is reporting movement in the Tal Tamar, about 20 kilometers from the border, saying it was done to confront the Turkish aggression, and it was welcomed by the people there. The extraordinary deal between Kurds, Syria and Russia, Syria's main ally, comes 4 days after Turkish forces moved against the Kurds in northern Syria after nearly all U.S. forces pulled out. Turkey regards the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Force as terrorists, aligned with separatists inside Turkey. Meanwhile, the U.S. President Donald Trump has announced the U.S. is withdrawing all remaining troops from northern Syria, tweeting that it is, quote, very smart for a change not to be involved in fighting in Syria. He said those who want American forces to stay support endless wars. French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel said at a joint news conference that Turkey is risking an unbearable humanitarian situation.
Cette offensive prend le risque, d'une part,
on one hand, this offensive risks creating an unsustainable humanitarian situation, and we already can see it on the ground. And on the other hand, it risks helping the Islamic State group re-emerge in the region. In the face of this situation, we will stay very coordinated, as we were when we notified Turkey that we would end our arms sales, as well as with the initiative that we have to take in the coming hours and the coming days.
Today, I spoke with President Erdogan for 1 hour. Of course, we have to consider Turkey's security interests. But we also think we have to put a stop to this Turkish invasion because of humanitarian reasons. Neither can we accept this situation facing the Kurds, and we really have to find another solution.
Meanwhile, President Trump says potential sanctions against Turkey are ready as Ankara presses on with a military offensive in the area. Reports of executions of Kurdish civilians by a Turkish-backed militia have intensified concerns. And as we hear from Michael Sullivan, news of a deal between Syria and the Kurds to block a Turkish invasion has made an ever-changing situation more complex.
An attack in northeastern Syria, part of an assault that Turkey says is aimed at Syrian Kurdish fighters whom Ankara calls terrorists. A celebration by the Turkey-backed Free Syrian Army after capturing the city of Tel Abyad. In Beirut, Kurdish residents have protested the incursions, ordered by Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Another protest in London. While Kurds in Syria mourn 3 of 9 civilians they say were executed by Turkish-backed rebels. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham criticized Trump for abandoning the Kurds who fought Islamic State. An administration official says it's complicated. Both Turkey and the Kurds are U.S. allies.
You have a NATO ally on one hand fighting against the Kurds who were helping us with the fight against ISIS. We are in daily communications with Turkey, both at the Defense Department, the State Department, on very specific issues. We are ready to go on a moment's notice to put on sanctions.
This border town in Turkey has been hit by fire from Syria. There have been Turkish casualties. Tens of thousands have fled their homes in northern Syria, joining hundreds of thousands of displaced persons. Erdogan says he wants to create a buffer zone for refugees. Trump says the threat of sanctions against Turkey can be effective. Democrats have criticized his handling of the crisis.
Now, what does it say to the entire world that you have a president who gets off the phone with Erdogan of Turkey and then sends out a tweet that says, oh, by the way, we're deserting these people who have put their lives on the line to work with us in fighting against some of the worst terrorists in the world. Sends a message to the entire world, you cannot trust the United States of America.
As conditions deteriorate, the situation on the ground is becoming more tangled. The Kurdish Authority said Sunday it had reached an agreement with Damascus to let Syrian troops deploy along Syria's border with Turkey to block the Turkish army and its allied rebel forces. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
It's time for our Monday Sports Report, and joining us now is Sandy Shomari. Hello, Sandy. What do you have lined up today for us?
Hello, Esther. This was a great weekend, a sporting weekend also for Kenyans, especially Esther. Kenyan runner Brigid Kosgei made history when she became the fastest woman ever to run a marathon. Kosgei crossed the finish line of the Chicago Marathon in 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 4 seconds, more than a minute faster than the record set by British runner Paula Radcliffe back in 2003. Not only did Kosgei break Radcliffe's record, she smashed it. Kosgei, who also won the Chicago Marathon in 2018, says this year's cheering crowd gave her the energy to run even faster. Well, if you have heard the news, where have you been? Kenyans around the world are still on cloud 9 after Eliud Kipchoge made athletics history on Saturday. He became the first person to run a marathon under 2 hours. Kipchoge's achievement is seen as the biggest of its kind in athletics since Briton Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile in 1954. And in Nairobi, traffic came to a standstill as people gathered in bars and in front of TV screens to watch their national hero close in on the finish line. But Kipchoge's accomplishment won't count for record-setting purposes because it did not adhere to certain official marathon rules. Nevertheless, Kenyans remain jubilant and have vowed to reward Kipchoge for his feat. And Dennis Okoth is known in his hometown country of Kenya as Billabong. He made his name in Kenya's national boxing team after a long career as an amateur fighter. In June this year, Okoth won the welterweight American Boxing Organization belt, becoming the first Kenyan to do so. Now, he is opening up about his international career and his next move. I sat down with Okoth here in Washington recently, and I began by asking him about his latest victory.
It was hard because, you know, when I start, you know, this opportunity come, we didn't know we're gonna have opportunity like this. So in the camp, when they called about the fight, and for me already, that was my plan, to have a fight like that on the fight they can show on TV. And when they call my management and they say, "Oh, Dennis, how we can take this fight?" And I say, "Yeah, already this is what we was waiting for. So I think this is our time." So I train hard, because you know, all the time boxer need to be on point, because this my work. So I've been still training every day. So when this opportunity come through, and we take it, yeah.
You get yourself so many fans that night after the fight, and even the commentators were talking about that you're a strong fighter, a big man, especially at welterweight, you know, and they were worried about your left hook. They say you have a good left hook. So tell me, you fought through Olympics, yeah? You went through all kinds of amateurs, Junior Olympics, you got a silver medal, Commonwealth silver medal, so you were prepared. You look prepared for this thing. How do you see your way going forward now? You have the ABO. This is like a starting point. What's your plans going forward? What are you looking forward to do right now?
My plan right now is to, cause you know, this is the first one. So, and my dream, I want to hold like all belt. Yeah, I want to challenge champions. Yeah, so the thing is, my dream after this, after ABO here, I need to, like next fight can be like WBC Continental. We have IBF. So one of those, by right now, we plan, so I can hold one of them. So to be a champion, because that's my dream.
Thanks, Billabong, and that wraps up today's Bumper Sporting Edition. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you so much, Sunday, and that wraps up our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a very good evening.